The accidental encounter. The morning sun gleamed through the high-rise skyline of New York, reflecting off the glass walls of Blackwood International, a company known for its wealth, power, and precision. Inside, everything was movement and perfection, except for one nervous heartbeat echoing through the marble corridors. Olivia Parker clutched her tablet close to her chest, her steps echoing softly as she rushed down the hall. It was her first day as the company's new lead translator, a dream job that she'd fought hard for after years of study, sleepless nights, and endless interviews. Yet today of all days she was late. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about the morning briefing, 5 minutes to go. The elevator ride had been longer than expected, and she still hadn't located the main conference room. Her heels clicked faster as she followed the signs down an unfamiliar hallway. A sudden panic hit her. She needed to find a restroom urgently. Then she spotted a door with a small engraved sign, something that vaguely resembled a restroom symbol. Without hesitation, she pushed it open. The moment she stepped inside, she froze. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus, and soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. It wasn't a restroom, it was something else. A private spa. The marble floors shimmered, steam curled through the air, and the faint sound of running water came from behind a frosted glass wall. Her heart skipped. "Oh no," she whispered, backing toward the door. Before she could leave, the water stopped. A shadow moved behind the glass, and a deep voice broke the silence. "Who's there?" Olivia turned as a tall man stepped into view, water still dripping from his broad shoulders. He wore nothing but a towel around his waist, his expression sharp, eyes narrowed in confusion. Time seemed to slow. It was James Blackwood, the CEO himself, the man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms worldwide, the man whose face she'd seen in every company newsletter. And here she was, standing frozen in his private spa, eyes wide, words lost somewhere between panic and humiliation. I'm sorry," she stammered, clutching her tablet tighter. "I thought this was the restroom." He tilted his head, the faintest hint of disbelief in his voice. "This floor is restricted access. Employees don't usually wander in here." Olivia's throat went dry. "I'm new here, sir. I got lost on the way to the meeting room." "New?" His eyes flickered with recognition. "Miss Parker from Geneva?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, that's me. Olivia Parker, sir. Lead translator." James regarded her in silence. Even in this absurd situation, there was something composed and deliberate in his demeanor. "I see," he said slowly. "Then perhaps we can chalk this up to poor navigation." Relief washed over her, until she realized her heel had caught on the rug. She stumbled forward, instinctively reaching out for balance. Corwin and her hand landed flat against his chest. For one long, breathless second, their eyes met. His heart was pounding fast beneath her palm, and the air between them thickened with something unspoken. I'm sorry," she whispered again, pulling back as if burned. James's lips curved slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corners. "You certainly know how to make a first impression, Miss Parker." She wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "It won't happen again." "I hope not," he replied, his tone dry but not unkind. "The briefing starts in 5 minutes. Try not to find another spa on your way there." She nodded furiously and rushed out, cheeks burning red, heart racing like a drum. But as the door closed behind her, James Blackwood stood in silence, his usual cold composure shaken. It had been years since anything odd or anyone had managed to throw him off balance. And somehow that nervous, wide-eyed translator had done it effortlessly. By the time Olivia reached the correct floor, her pulse had barely settled. She took a deep breath outside the conference room door, forcing herself to regain composure. Inside, the board members were already seated, laptops open, papers spread neatly. James entered moments later, every step radiating confidence and control. Their eyes met briefly across the table, just long enough for Olivia to feel her stomach twist. He didn't acknowledge her, but something in his gaze told her he hadn't forgotten their awkward encounter. The meeting began, and Olivia focused on her task, translating complex proposals between languages with precision and grace. But her mind kept flicking back to that moment, the scent of eucalyptus, the glint of water, the quiet tension that lingered in the air. When the meeting ended, she packed up her tablet quickly, hoping to escape unnoticed. "Miss Parker," the voice stopped her cold. She turned to find James standing behind her, one brow raised. "Yes, sir." He handed her a small stack of documents. Translate these before noon. No errors. It wasn't a request. Her pulse quickened, but she nodded. Of course. As he turned to leave, she caught the faintest hint of a smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet understand. A connection forged through tension, curiosity, and the quiet pull of two lives that were about to change forever. Pressure and sparks by. Tuesday morning, Olivia understood one thing clearly. James Blackwood did not forget. He sent tasks with sharp deadlines and sharper notes as if daring her to stumble. A courier arrived at 8:05 a.m. with a folder full of contracts in German, Mandarin, and Arabic, each bristling with handwritten flags. Complete by noon. No errors. The line cut through her like a blade and a challenge at the same time. She settled at her desk, rolled up her sleeves, and went to work. She translated not only the words but the culture inside those words. She marked places where a phrase would be read as too aggressive in Berlin, too vague in Shanghai, too ceremonial in Dubai. She added short margin notes that explained her choices. She removed extra legal padding that meant nothing across borders. When she finished, it was 11:52 a.m. She walked the pages to his office and knocked. No answer. A second knock. The door opened and a blast of cool air hit her. He was at the window. Suit jacket off, tie loosened, the skyline pouring light over his shoulders like a second suit. His eyes flicked to the clock, then to her hands. "You're early," he said. "I allowed time for review," she said, and put the folder on his desk. He opened it and began to read, page after page. For a long minute, the only sound was the soft click of the wall clock and the slow drag of a page turning. He frowned once, then not in the way of disapproval, more like deep calculation. When he looked up, something complicated passed through his eyes. "You changed phrasing here," he said, tapping the German page. "I softened the risk language," she said. "Direct translation would insult the partner's reputation. This keeps the meaning but not the sting." His mouth almost curved, then held. "And here? In Mandarin, a literal line would sound like 'we expect them to fail.' I reframed it to sound like shared responsibility." He leaned back. "You took initiative." "I took care," she said softly. The clock ticked. He closed the folder. "You'll sit in on the call at 2, he said. "Be ready for changes." "Always," she said, then turned to go. "Miss Parker," he added, and she paused at the door. Good work. It was 2 simple words, yet they struck something bright in her chest. She left the office standing a little taller, surprised at how those words carried more warmth than a bouquet. By afternoon, the office hummed with a different kind of noise. A charity gala was coming, and several departments scrambled for last-minute details. Olivia's inbox filled with guest lists and translated invitations. She moved through the tasks easily until a new email appeared with no subject line, sent from a blank address that looked almost like an error. "Be careful who you trust. Not every test is about work." Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. A prank, probably, or some internal joke aimed at new hires. She deleted it. But it did not leave her mind. That one sentence nestled behind everything she did, like a small stone in a shoe you cannot shake free. At 2 o'clock, she joined the conference room for the German investor call. Executives gathered around a long glass table. James sat at the head, composed, unreadable. When the screen filled with faces from Berlin, Olivia slipped into translator mode. She carried their words back and forth like water in 2 hands, steady, careful. Twice she reshaped James's phrasing to keep it firm but respectful. Once she added a spoonful of context that turned a potential misunderstanding into a laugh. James noticed. She felt his attention like a steady heat at the edge of her vision. After the call, the CFO nodded at her. "We should have hired 2 of you," he said. It felt like a wink from the building itself. When she reached her desk again, the anonymous email had a reply to itself, as if the sender had written a second message against the first thread. "The gala will show you who he really is." She stared at the screen. Her heartbeat ticked faster. She took a breath and closed her laptop. She was not here to chase ghosts. She was here to work. The rest of the week turned into a slow climb with small storms. James dropped last-minute briefs, then stopped by to ask 1 or 2 crisp questions that made her feel like she was standing at a chalkboard solving a problem under a watchful eye. He never raised his voice. He never praised too much. He stayed at a distance, as if every kindness had to pass through customs, yet the distance kept cracking. Thursday evening, she passed his office and saw him at the window again, shoulders tense, jaw tight. He held a glass of water the way some men hold a steering wheel in a storm. She stepped in without thinking. "Do you need anything for tomorrow's guest list?" she asked. He turned, surprised, maybe grateful for the interruption. "We're done," he said, then paused. "How do you do it? What?" "Translate people." She blinked. "Is that what you think I do?" He looked at the skyline. "You adjust tone between languages. You do it between people too." "I listen for the part they're hiding," she said. The words left her before she could measure them. Most people want to be understood more than they want to be right. He didn't speak for a long breath. "That's dangerous knowledge," he said eventually. "Useful," she said. His eyes softened just a degree. The air changed. Then his phone lit up on the desk, pulling him back behind the glass. "We leave for Paris Monday," he said. "Business again. Investors 2 days. You'll come?" "Of course," she said, though the words sounded far away, as if the room had suddenly widened and the floor had tilted. The gala arrived like a second city built inside their building. Chandeliers threw down rivers of light. Strings played from somewhere that felt like a memory. Olivia wore a simple midnight blue dress that made her feel both quieter and more seen. She moved through the crowd listening, translating, guiding guests toward the right conversation with the right smile. James was a different kind of quiet. In a tailored tux, he carried his authority the way some men carry a scar, always there, always a part of the room. People orbited him. He stayed controlled, polite, efficient. But when a waiter offered him champagne, a small recoil crossed his face, so quick most would miss it. Olivia did not. He stepped onto the balcony. She followed at a distance and then, after one long breath, stepped through the door as well. The night air was cool. The city smelled like rain had promised to come and then changed its mind. "You should be inside," he said without turning. "They can manage for a minute," she said. "I noticed you don't drink at these things." He was quiet. "Champagne is for toasts," he said after a moment. "I don't toast much." She stood beside him. "Bad memories?" His hand tightened on the rail. "Old ones." "You can leave them behind," she said. He looked at her and something raw moved in his gaze. "Can you?" he asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was a man standing in a doorway he hadn't opened for years, asking if the hinges would hold. "I try," she said. They stood like that, not touching, breathing the same careful air. She felt every word they were not saying build a bridge between them plank by plank. The door behind them opened. Laughter spilled out. The bridge trembled but did not fall. Later, inside, the French executive, Thomas Lauren, found her. He was charmed the way cologne is strong, pleasant, then too much. He praised her work and let his hand rest a second too long on her wrist. She smiled, stepped back, kept it gracious, kept it distant. When she glanced up, James was watching. The line of his shoulder shifted, then smoothed. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated. A new email, the same empty address. "The past does not stay asleep. Watch the man who does not toast." Her mouth went dry. She slid the phone away, heart loud, smile steady. The night ended in glitter and exhaustion. She took the subway home with her heels in one hand and the city's pulse in the other. When she reached her apartment, a thin envelope waited under the door with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, James with a woman and a little girl, all three laughing in sunlight. On the back, one line in neat anonymous print. "Every wall has a door. Every door has a key." She stood in her quiet kitchen, the city outside like soft thunder, the photograph trembling in her hand. Curiosity pulled at her. Fear warned her back. Somewhere between those two, something else bloomed, resolve maybe, or the first shape of courage. She placed the photo on the counter and whispered to the empty room, "I see you, James." Then, to herself, "And I will see this through." Morning would come with flights and boardrooms in another city, but tonight ended with a promise written in her pulse. The story was no longer about tests and translations. It was about the door in a man's wall, the key no one had found, and the question of what happens when someone dares to turn it. Beneath the walls, the Paris trip began beneath a sky the color of soft silver. The jet hummed like a promise, slicing through clouds as Olivia reviewed her notes beside the window. Across the aisle, James sat silent, expression unreadable, Yet there was a subtle gravity about him, as if his thoughts were heavier than the plane itself. When they landed, everything moved with the rhythm of efficiency. Chauffeur waiting, hotel prepared, meetings arranged. Yet under that rhythm, something different pulsed. It wasn't just work now. It was awareness. The space between them felt alive with quiet tension neither of them could name aloud. The first meeting with the French investors was a success. Olivia spoke fluent French, her words carrying a warmth that softened the sharp edges of corporate talk. She noticed James watching her more than once, not the way a CEO watches his employee, but the way a man watches someone who surprises him. At lunch, Thomas Lauren, one of the French executives, joined them. Charming, easygoing, and far too bold. He leaned too close when speaking to Olivia, complimenting her accent and smile. James's jaw tensed, his polite nods shortening with each passing minute. Olivia noticed but said nothing, though her pulse picked up as she sensed the growing strain beneath James's calm facade. That evening, after hours of negotiations, they entered the hotel elevator together. As the doors closed, the hum of the machinery filled the silence. The elevator shuddered once, then stopped. The lights flickered, leaving only a soft emergency glow. "Not again," James muttered, pressing the emergency button. "Déjà vu," Olivia said, trying to mask her nerves with humor. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "You have a talent for showing up at the most inconvenient times." "At least you're fully dressed this time," she blurted out, then covered her mouth. "I mean," he laughed quietly, a sound rare and rich. "You apologize too much." The sound filled the small space, making the tension soften, then thicken again. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, charged, impossible to ignore. After a moment, Olivia asked softly, "Why did it bother you today?" "Lauren, I mean." He turned, his gaze heavy.
"You know why, do I?"
He stepped closer, his voice low. "Ever since the day you walked into that spa, you've been undoing me. I keep testing you because I don't know what else to do. Every wall I build, you walk right through." Olivia's breath caught. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it worse." The air between them was electric. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world had narrowed to this elevator. This moment, their unspoken confessions hanging like fragile glass. But then, as if fate couldn't resist irony, the elevator jolted back to life. The lights brightened. Both stepped back instinctively, pretending nothing had happened. The moment dissolved, leaving only the echo of what could have been. Later that night, Olivia sat by her hotel window, the Eiffel Tower glimmering in the distance. She thought about his words, about the pain she'd seen in his eyes at the gala, about the photo that had been slipped under her apartment door. There was something broken behind James's calm surface, something that wasn't about business or loss, but about guilt. Her phone buzzed. A new message from that same blank address. "The truth sleeps beneath the Blackwood name. Wake it and you'll see the man, not the mask." She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Something inside her whispered that this wasn't random, that whatever haunted James was tied to the tragedy he'd once mentioned. The next morning, during the final negotiation session, she noticed James hesitate when a French investor mentioned a past merger, the same one connected to his wife's death. His fingers tightened slightly around his pen. Olivia stepped in smoothly, translating the conversation in a way that redirected the topic without drawing attention. She did it instinctively to protect him. When the meeting ended, he caught up to her in the corridor. "You deflected that on purpose." She met his gaze calmly. "Yes, why?" "Because it hurt you," she said simply. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his expression shifted, the usual hardness melting into something almost human, almost fragile. "You shouldn't care that much." "Maybe not," she replied softly. "But I do." He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time again. Not as his employee, not as a translator, but as someone who had somehow found the cracks in his armor and turned them into doorways. That evening, he invited her for dinner, nothing formal, just a quiet place near the Seine. They talked for hours, not about work, but about life. About dreams they never chased, about the price of ambition. She learned that James hadn't always been this cold, that before the tragedy, he'd been passionate about humanitarian work, that he'd built the company not just for profit, but to create something meaningful. "After I lost them," he said quietly, "I shut everything out, people, emotions, life. It was easier to manage numbers than memories. And yet you still built something beautiful, she said. He looked at her with something like gratitude. You make it sound like I can be more than my mistakes. You already are, she whispered. The night deepened around them, the river whispering below the bridge. Neither spoke for a while. Words were unnecessary. The silence between them had become its own language. Back at the hotel, before heading to their rooms, he paused. You make me remember what it feels like to breathe, he said quietly. Her throat tightened. Then don't stop. It was a confession, a connection, and a promise all at once. She closed her door and leaned against it, heart racing. Something inside her told her that this story, theirs, wasn't just about attraction or fate. It was about healing, about two broken souls teaching each other to live again. She didn't yet know the storm waiting for them back home. But in that Paris night, surrounded by city lights and second chances, Olivia Parker believed for the first time that even the most shattered hearts could learn to trust again. The healing back in New York, the rhythm of life at Blackwood International resumed, but something was undeniably different. The cold corridors didn't feel as sharp, the long hours didn't weigh as heavily, and the man at the top, James Blackwood, was no longer the same unshakable figure who ruled his empire from behind glass walls. Paris had changed something between them. Olivia felt it in every glance they shared, every word spoken just a little too softly, every silence that lingered longer than it should. Still, they both knew that within the walls of the company, emotions were dangerous currency. One wrong step could cost them everything. Yet sometimes the heart ignores logic. One morning, Olivia arrived at her desk to find an envelope with no name, only the Blackwood crest. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an invitation to the upcoming board summit. It wasn't her place to attend, but the note below the header said, "Your insight will be needed." Signed simply, JB. She wasn't sure what to think. He had never invited anyone outside the executive circle. That evening, as she reviewed documents, in the quiet of her office, the lights flickered briefly. She looked up to see James standing by the door, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but kind. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been working," she replied gently. He stepped inside. "Those two things seem to mean the same thing for you, and for you," she countered. He gave a small smile, then leaned against her desk, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne. "Paris changed something," he said quietly. "I think we both know that." Her heart skipped. "It did." He hesitated, searching for words. "You made me see what I'd been running from for years." "The past?" "Forgiveness," he said softly. "And maybe hope." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He frowned, read the screen, and his expression hardened. "We need to talk. In my office." They hurried down the hall. When they entered, the large screen on his desk was already flashing with encrypted alerts. Olivia's eyes widened as she recognized part of the message. Confidential data leaks. Connected to the 5-year-old merger incident, the same one that had cost him his wife and daughter. James's voice was low, tense. "This means the fire, the explosion. It wasn't just sabotage for money. Someone from within leaked those blueprints." Olivia froze. "Someone inside the company?" He nodded grimly. "And whoever sent you those anonymous messages, they knew." She felt a chill run through her. "Then they weren't threatening me. They were warning us." He turned toward her, eyes fierce. "We need to find out who." Together, they began tracing through digital files, piecing together what fragments remained from years of archives. Hours turned into dawn. As the first light touched the windows, they found it. Emails hidden under layers of encryption. A senior executive had sold proprietary designs to a rival firm. The explosion that killed James's family was meant to cover the evidence of that betrayal. James sank into his chair, silent. His hands trembled slightly, not with anger but with exhaustion. "All this time," he murmured, "I blamed myself. I thought if I'd been there, Maybe. Olivia placed a hand over his. You couldn't have known. You couldn't have saved them. But now you can save yourself from carrying the guilt. His eyes met hers, raw, vulnerable, unguarded. You sound so sure. I am, she whispered, because I see you, James. The man, not the mistakes. And you deserve peace. For the first time, his composure broke. His eyes shimmered with unshed emotion, and before words could bridge the silence, he pulled her close. The embrace wasn't romantic at first. It was human, desperate, real. It was the kind of embrace that says, "You're not alone anymore." When he finally pulled back, there was a faint, trembling smile on his lips. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has," he said softly. "You reminded me what it feels like to care and to live." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but she smiled. "Then live, James. That's all I ever wanted for you." The following weeks passed with quiet transformation. The board scandal broke. Justice was served. James personally led a new foundation, in his family's name, funding global education and rebuilding research programs that once defined their dreams. He no longer hid behind walls of control. Instead, he built bridges, between people, between hearts. And Olivia? She became more than his translator. She became the voice that helped him reconnect with his team, his mission, his humanity. Months later, as the city lights glowed beneath a soft spring night, James found her on the same balcony where it all began. The place of confessions and distance, now reborn as something new. "I never thanked you," he said, stepping beside her. "You didn't have to." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I want to, for walking into the wrong room that day." She laughed softly. "That was the best mistake I ever made." They stood side by side, gazing at the skyline that reflected both the end of one story and the beginning of another. James turned to her, his voice gentle. "You once told me that living without trust isn't living at all. You were right. I'm learning to trust again." "And?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes soft, full of quiet gratitude and something deeper. "It feels like breathing again." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of jasmine through the air, and somewhere in the distance, the city pulsed with life and renewal. Olivia smiled, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "Then breathe, James, just breathe." And under the endless sky, with the world moving quietly around them, they did. Not as CEO and translator, not as two broken souls, but as two people who had finally learned that even in the aftermath of loss, there is always light. And sometimes the right mistake becomes the beginning of everything.